What's up, everyone? It's your boy Norrin Brad 89 here, bringing you another video today to talk about Exorcist 3. Yes, continuing our Exorcist review series, as now we're going to talk about William Peter Blatty's Exorcist 3, which is based off the book Legion, and this is my Exorcist film. Let's just get that out of the way right now. This is, when I think of The Exorcist, this is the film that I think of. I don't really actually necessarily know when I got introduced to this one. I can't really remember, but this is always the one that comes to mind when I think of the scares, when I think of what I want, when I think of the Exorcist franchise. This is always the film that comes to mind. So let's discuss Exorcist 3. Roll it. So Exorcist 3 came out in 1990, and yes, this is my Exorcist film, and this is a prime example of why I enjoy sequels so much and why I always champion sequels. Even if I think they do look pretty awful, I will always champion a sequel, because we never know when you get those bad ones. You never know when you're going to get those really great ones, like Exorcist 3. A prime example of what I love about this film is I love the story, where we have Lieutenant Kinderman, I believe is his last name, and it's played by George C. Scott, where he's investigating a series of murders that has to do and is very similar to a killer that he investigated years prior, but where it ties into the Exorcist film from the first film is the body of Father Karras, and that I think is a fantastic thing. We're going to discuss more, and we will talk spoilers in this video, so be warned. But yeah, that's a prime example, a positive for me, is I love the way they're able to take Exorcist 3 and have that connective tissue with the first film, because one of my problems with Exorcist 2, The Heretic, is they kind of basically ignore Father Karras' character, and Father Karras is a prime character, and his theme, and like the whole theme of what happened to him at the end of the first film, it carries into Exorcist 3, and I love the way they use his character. So the story wise, I love that, and I love also the performances in here. We got to talk about the performances for real, because for me, George C. Scott is the best out of anything else in the Exorcist franchise. Any actor, anybody, he is the best right now in terms of performances in the Exorcist franchise. I think what he does with this detective is amazing. Like, one example is there's a scene where he's talking to one of the other fathers, and it's his best friend, basically, and he's trying to cheer him up, and they're going to see It's a Wonderful Life, the movie, and George C. Scott has this kind of monologue sequence where he's talking about a carp in a bathtub that his mother-in-law is keeping, and just George C. Scott, the way he's able to sell this dialogue and talk this scene up, it's only a scene that he can do. And like I said, he is clearly the best performance and best actor in any Exorcist film. I don't care. So that's why I really love the performances. But add to that, we also have Brad Dourif in here playing the Gemini killer, and he has so many dialogue sequences that are so haunting, and the way that he describes his killings and the way he talks about things just in those many minutes that he has with George C. Scott's character, like, for real. This is a film that's it's an hour and 50 minutes, but it feels like it's only an hour and 30, because I'm so invested with the great dialogue that it just flows off of the tongue. And I really think the atmosphere is also very strong in this film too. Add to that, adding to the atmosphere, they introduced the original Exorcist theme song very early in this film. I think they knew right off the bat what Heretic did and some of the problems and some of the mistakes that they made, and one was not acknowledging that original amazing score. And Exorcist 3 has its own score as well, but they do play the original one within the first 10 minutes of the movie. This one also has some of the best scares and some of the best sequences, and I mean, just in general, we have a very good jump scare that's probably most famous for. A lot of people that even don't know Exorcist 3 know the jump scare from this film involving the character. It's a hallway sequence, and it's just a very calm shot where the camera kind of sits still and it stays there, and out of nowhere, it comes out of nowhere, and it happens with a certain sound too, and it's basically a great execution of a jump scare of how you're supposed to do it. But there's also moments, like I said, where Brad Dourif's just talking about the killings of the Gemini killer and how he executes them. And for real, there are some really haunting scenes and some creepy imagery in here. And I think, for me, like I said, when I think of Exorcist films, this is the one that comes to mind. And this is kind of like that Mike Flanagan, like kind of Ouija Origin of Evil kind of thing, like how a sequel came out and it's just so much better than the first one for me. Like I said, this film offers me so much more. Where I watched the first Exorcist film and it's more of a respect thing. There's moments where I'm bored and there's moments where I see flaws, but like I said, I respect that film. Exorcist 3 is the film that I genuinely love this movie. But let's talk about some negatives, because there is a couple minor negatives I have with this film, where I do enjoy our other priest character that comes into the third act and ends up doing our exorcism on Father Karras and going after the Gemini killer, because the Gemini killer is using Father Karras's body to execute and do murders, and then he ends up getting locked up in this mental kind of asylum place where they keep mental patients, and he's also kind of body hopping as well. So there's a lot of elements of possession in this film, but I think that that priest character at the end is kind of shoehorned in. I like the performance and I like the exorcism, and especially when we get George C. Scott in the room too, it just elevates the scene even more. But for me, I do feel that's kind of a negative, is I feel like they kind of shoehorn him in just in there in the end, and you're like, it kind of comes out of nowhere, because the rest of the film isn't really like that. The rest of the film is more kind of like akin to Seven or The Bone Collector. That's how I would describe the first two acts of this film. And then when we get into the third act, they go full on Exorcist. But even despite that, like I said, the performances, the atmosphere, just the way they're able to tie this one into that first film, I adore this movie for real. And Exorcist 3, a Radd rating. Let's just get it out of here, right out of the way. Exorcist 3 for a Radd rating. This film's going to get a 9 out of 10. Like I said, this is one of my favorite possession, films out there, religious horror films. And this is the film, like I always tell people when they bring up the Exorcist franchise, no, I'm an Exorcist 3 lover, like for real. I always champion this film over that first film. I do have a lot of respect for where this franchise came from. But like I said, Exorcist 3 is a prime example of why I'm a sequel whore, because there's just so many times where there are horror franchises. I might do a list maybe later, down the line on the channel of horror sequels that I definitely enjoy more than the original. But there's so many prime examples, like for Psycho 2, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, right? Like I said, right here, we're talking about this one. There are examples for me where I love the sequels more than the original, where they came from. And like I said, I think Exorcist 3 is one of those films that I highly recommend. This is a very strong recommend, because it's more of a thriller detective type story, but it has very strong horror vibes in it, cool imagery, great performances basically across the board, and some of my favorite, scary dialogue sequence moments, and some really good solid jump scares as well. So Exorcist 3 has a lot to offer, and I think this is like a very strong film. It's grown in popularity over the years. This is one of those films that when I was a kid, no one really talked about. Like, when I was 10, 11, 12, 15, no one was really talking about Exorcist 3. It was like, oh, it's so much better than the first one. No one was talking about it. It is a more recent thing, but I think that's just because more eyes have gotten to the film, especially because of physical media. And that's why I always champion physical media and buying the movies that you love, is because when you do that, it shows people, that it gets more eyes on products, and they make these films and they put them out there. So definitely support the films that you love. But I hope you all enjoyed this video as we discussed Exorcist 3. Please let me know down below in the comment section, what are your thoughts on this movie? Because like I said, these are just my thoughts, my opinions. They're not the right ones. This is not telling you this is totally better than The Exorcist. If you love that first Exorcist film and it's one of your favorites, I'm not knocking you. I totally understand why, and why like I said, you love that film, because I highly respect it. But let me know your thoughts on Exorcist 3. But please like the video. Definitely helps out the channel. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, and have that notification bell poked so you're notified anytime I drop a video. But most importantly, you all know what's up. Have a safe and happy day. Peace out.